firstly, how are you doing tonight?
I'm very well, thank you.
Brilliant. Paul, what about yourself?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, mate. Just looking forward to this one. I know Mark's got he's had a long storied career in the National League, so I'm sure there's a few stories flying around.
Yeah, they certainly will be, and it's kind of been a busy time for the podcast at the moment. We're speaking off there. We had Mark White on last night, and then we've got Mark Cooper on tonight, so it should be a good one. But I think we more or less should just get straight into it then. So, Mark, of course, we'll start things off with Yeovil. We'll probably flip back to the likes of Forest Green and maybe a bit on your time at Notts County, but just starting things off with Yeovil then. What was it like just coming into the club in the first place then for you?
Well, obviously, I'd been out of work for, I don't know, 6 months maybe, and I got a phone call from Scott Priestnall and asked me would I be interested in taking over at Yeovil. Always viewed it as a sleeping giant, a big club. So I gave it a go. And then I think it's always the way. It's not until you get actually on the inside of a club, you realise the problems and the amount of work that it needs to try and sort it out. And that was certainly the case at Yeovil.
So, I mean, Mark, obviously Scott Priestnall was not long under, so you weren't working under him that long until he sort of, well, I don't suppose he didn't really sell it to Matt Ugler, did he? Sort of, no. Matt Ugler became the custodian of the club. You know, what did anything change under Matt Ugler's reign? And I know it probably wasn't the best, but you know, was there positives as well as negatives?
Well, I didn't see a lot of Scott. Scott lived in Ireland, so I think he came over once, and then we sort of conversed via message or phone, and it was clear obviously he was trying to sell the club or pass the club on. So his priority wasn't really in terms of spending lots of money, and it was just a case of trying to keep the club in the league. We made a really good start, and we didn't lose hardly any games, and we looked like we were going to be really comfortable staying in the league. Obviously Matt and his family, his mum Julianne and his entourage came in, and I think Matt will be the first now to admit that they got it wrong in terms of the way they recruited. And I think if you look at the players that they recruited for us to try and stay in the National League, I don't think any of them are playing at the level or above. I think they're all below or retired. And I think Matt will be the first to admit that was his first sort of foray into football as a prospective owner, and it didn't go particularly well.
Did you ever get the opportunity to bring in your own players during that time? Because I know at first you signed on a 2.5-year deal. You came in, I think, towards mid-season, wasn't it, when you firstly came in? And you just mentioned there about Yeovil, they were kind of mid-table, weren't they? Lower mid-table when you came in. And did you feel you had the opportunity to attract your own players, or was that kind of taken out of your hands?
Well, I think when I came in, they were right near the bottom.
Yeah.
And then we managed to get, 6, 7, 8 points clear of the bottom four. And I managed to bring in, while Scott was still here, 3 or 4 sort of players that I thought could help us. And we were on a good run. And obviously Matt came in and they were under an agreement where they could sign players. And that was his gift. And he signed the players that him and his people around him that they thought were right for the club, but they weren't. And times told that was the case. They were the wrong fit for the club and not what the club needed to stay in the National League. And I did try and say that. It fell on deaf ears, but we all live and learn.
Yeah, I mean, Mark, obviously you've managed both in the EFL and in the National League now. and you sort of had a time away from the National League when you were in the EFL or you're out of work. When you came back in, did you see a difference in the National League and the quality of the teams and the players overall?
Yeah, I think that the National League now, and I've heard a few managers say this. I listened to Andy Woodman on Talk Sport a couple of weeks ago. I think it was just before the England quarterfinals. He's best mates with Gareth Southgate and Ian. Obviously, I played with Woody. I know, and he was saying that the National League should be League Three. It shouldn't be viewed as non-league because it's so professional. There's so many good teams in it. There's so many good managers, coaches, players that I think it's time to abandon the non-league tag. And it is basically the third division of the Football League.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. And I know it's something that we've been talking about for a while. And of course, when you came into Yeovil, I think at that point, it really did feel like potentially that was going to happen because we had a number of huge clubs in the division. I think we still have to a certain extent, but then we had the likes of Wrexham, I think, were in the division, Notts County. I think at the time, Stockport had just got promoted as well. And it felt like potentially something like that were going to happen, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen now. But just thinking of that time, when you were relegated with Yeovil, now coming back into the division now, do you feel that perhaps it's a little bit weaker and there's a bit more of an opportunity now, especially with Chesterfield exiting the division, for you guys to really put your stamp on this National League?
Well, I think what you've got now is what you've mentioned there is that, saying it's a bit weaker. I think what's happened is everybody now has seen it as an opportunity that Wrexham, Notts County, Chesterfield, that those clubs are out of the league. Everybody's seen it as an opportunity to get promoted. So more clubs are now throwing money at it, thinking that this is their year.
Yeah.
And I think it's now sort of spread wider and other teams are spending money because, like I said, they see it as an opportunity to get in the EFL. So I think it's now, you haven't got sort of your Wrexham and your Notts County that are miles in front. You've got a spread of 7, 8, 9, 10 teams that are all spending money.
Yeah.
Not as much as Wrexham and Notts County, but you've got Forest Green, Southend have now been saved that are going to have a go. Barnet, all these teams that, rightly so, are having a go to get back in the AFL. And I think the league's probably stronger now.
Yeah.
But further down, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
You can probably go down to 10, 12 places where teams all feel as though they got a realistic opportunity to get promoted.
So just on about your time at Yeovil and coming back to when the first period of time when you came in now, of course, getting relegated with the club, it was unfortunate. I personally I think majority, it wasn't down to you at all, that relegation with what had been happening there. What was it though for you that made you feel that I'm going to stick with Yeovil, I want to get them back into the National League then?
Well, I think you feel a sense of responsibility that you've been at the helm, although it was to a degree taken out of my hands for the last few months. Then you have a degree of loyalty to the players that you want to try and stick by them. Should I have walked away? Probably. But then you get a reputation from jumping ship. And the new owner came in and he said to me, look, I want you to get on with it. You know what we need. This is Martin Hellier. And he was fantastic. He said, look, there's the budget. Go and get on with it. Try and get us back in the National League. I'll be happy with top 10. But we managed to have a really good season. We really enjoyed it. Some brilliant clubs we went to in the National League South. And we ended up doing really well and winning the league quite comfortably.
And it was, I came and watched you a couple of times last year, and you were always that team that everyone wanted to beat, weren't you, Mark? Because of you were the front runner from the very beginning, and I suppose that's a real tough thing to do. But I could see why Hellier probably kept you on, because I know you've been promoted out of National League North. You've been promoted out of National League. You've now been promoted out of National League South. I think you're the only manager to do all three. Yeah. So clearly, you know what it takes. I suppose what's your next step is taking Yeovil back into National League and consolidating and maybe pushing onto that playoff place. Where do you see Yeovil sort of sitting next year under what you've recruited so far?
Well, going back to what you said about like the National League South, the biggest compliment I can give the players is that every team we played was desperate to beat us. And rightly so. You know, if I was a Slough player, a Farnborough player, or Welling, whoever, we're playing the big boys today, and we want to show that maybe I can go and play for. And we had play for Yeovil, and we had that every week. And the biggest compliment I could give to my players was that, on the whole, we stood up to that week in, week out, and managed to get lots of points and win the league comfortably. Going into the National League, it's like I said before, it's such a competitive league now, and there's so many good clubs, so many good teams that, you know, like, it's going to be really difficult. Have we got the biggest budget in the league? No. Does money mean everything? No. It's about getting a really competitive group of players. So we've managed to keep all our core players from last year that have done well. I want to give them the opportunity to step up. We've added 6 players around that group that give us some athleticism, some physicality, and it'd be interesting to see how will we go, Paul. I don't know, but I know that we'll have a real good go at it. We'll have a real distinctive style of play. My teams usually do, and who knows? But we've got the mindset and momentum that we're used to winning games of football, and we don't want that to change. You know, we won lots and lots of games last year, and we don't want that to change. And I think that can be a powerful thing, that momentum, and we want to take that. And if we have a good start, who knows?
Do you see a lot of similarities for the time when you were at Forest Green? Of course, you've done similar where you got promoted out of the National League North, I believe it was, into the National League at the time. And then to get them promoted again, is that something that you're wanting to do with Yeovil? Because I know compared to then, I don't know if you agree or not, but I think the gap's even bigger now, especially from the National League South to the National League. Do you believe that gap is a lot bigger now and it's going to be harder for you to perhaps progress even further?
Yeah, I think the gulf is big between the National League South. Although I must say, I was so impressed by so many coaches and so many players in the National League South. And I think you see how many players have gone from the South and the North into the National League or into the EFL. I think it speaks volumes for the standard of the National League, North, South and Premier, that there's so many players now going into the Football League. But yeah, I think the gulf on the whole is big to the National League Premier. But I don't think, unless you're a Wrexham or a Notts County, I don't think you can bridge that gap by going out and trying to compete financially, because, you know, like I say, unless you're a Wrexham or a Notts County, you have to try and build a squad competitive, which we've done. We've kept our group together, like I say, and we've got a real togetherness. We've added 6 players. We can't go and get a Paul Mullen. We can't go and get a Macaulay Langstaff. We can't go and get those kind of players. So we have to recruit differently, and we have to rely on having a real distinct style of play and a real momentum and togetherness for us to be successful.
Have you? I mean, obviously you brought in 6, Mark. Are you still in the market for certain players, or if something comes up, or would you now then start to look into the loan market out of the EFL or other sort of National League teams just to complement what you've already got?
Yeah, Paul, we're a couple short. Every manager will tell you that. This stage of the season, we have got 16 outfield players at the moment. We're a couple short. I'm on to the chairman. Of course, my job is to push him and to try and get more. And where we are now is we're now in that market where we're trying to be patient and wait to see which players fall through the net and don't get fixed up, that are too good for the level. Can we attract one of them? Location-wise at Yeovil means that it's tricky. So we have to hope that somebody has a connection to the southwest, or their wives are from the southwest. Or if not, we then have to look at Bristol City, Bristol Rovers, Exeter, Plymouth, Bournemouth, Southampton. And we have to rely on them guys to give us a really good loan that is ready to play in men's football.
I know that's something you've done so far, though, with your recruitment. I know you've kind of taken some players from Torquay, of course, proven themselves in the league below, but also in the National League. But we're also looking at your recruitment. You seem to be going for a lot of young players, especially under the age of 23. You know, Greenslade coming from Bristol Rovers, Cousin Dawson from Bradford, and Oliver Wright, of course, from Southampton. Is that something that you've been looking to do again? Is finding, young, talented players from sides, particularly local to you, like you've mentioned with Exeter and Bournemouth and Bristol?
If we can, yeah. Ideally, we want to try and get 25, 26-year-olds that know the level, have played above, and they've not got fixed up. They're holding out for a League One team and they don't get it. Then a League Two team don't take them, and all of a sudden they get left and they have to take a deal with a club like Yeovil. That's ideally where we are. But of course, we're looking at the loan market as well. So with the group of players that we kept, so you've got Frank Newbon, Matt Worthington, Michael Smith, Alex Whittle, Jordan Young. Who else we got? Morgan Williams, Jake Wannell. For me to get better than that, we would have to pay big salaries to improve that. Which at the moment we're not in a position where we can go and pay somebody $2.5 grand a week. So we have to then try and recruit around that group to try and give it, the group strength and backup, and to make sure that if any of them players come out of the team, that we've got somebody like for like ready to go in. So it's a real difficult jigsaw to try and put together with the group we've already got.
Yeah, and I think I don't think you're the only manager that will probably say that, Mark. At this stage of the season, we were talking when we spoke to Mark White this week. He was exactly the same in terms of what he's trying to recruit for Dorking, because he's going to be feel like one of the bigger fish in a smaller pond potentially after his exploits in the National League. So, are you happy with how your recruitment has gone so far in terms of who you've been able to attract, and have you managed to get most of the targets that you were aiming for?
Of course, we'll all be looking at targets A, B, and C. Are you going to get all your top line targets? No, impossible. But I think our recruitment's been good. You look at Brett McGavin, you look at Finn Cousin-Dawson. He's 21, played 40 games for Bradford in League Two. You look at Ollie Wright. So there were 6 or 7 National League and League clubs, EFL clubs after him, the goalkeeper. You look at Harvey Greenslade. Who else have we signed? Jordan Thomas from Hampton, who was a real star for them last year. So, I think we've added some real sort of athleticism to the group, some physicality, and more importantly, boys that are desperately hungry to succeed. And, last year we were in a position where we could go and get the best players in each position to be, one of the best teams in the South. And we did that. This year's different. We're competing against, like I say, Barnet, Southend, or Forest Green. They were signing Ben Tozer from Wrexham, by the way. They're signing Tom Knowles. They're signing Liam Sercombe. They're signing EFL-ready players. So, some of us at that level, we can't get to that financially. We have to, and you have to find a different way.
How do you sell it to those sort of players, the players that you're wanting to recruit then coming down to Yeovil? Because you've mentioned there about the change of location. What would it be for you when you're trying to attract these players? How do you sell it to them?
Well, we sell it to them that it's a big club. We get big crowds when we're going well. We have good facilities. We really try and coach the players to make them better. And if you look at most of them, their age range is quite young. And they know they're all going to get minutes. They're going to get work. They're going to get coached, and we're going to make them better. I think we make players better. So that's the selling point for us.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting what you say, Mark, because the way that you look at adopting your recruitment philosophy. When we spoke to Mark White last year, he said the biggest issue he came across and the challenge he had was he recruited badly, in his view. You know, he got lads that had been there and done it, if you like, but probably weren't the right fit for the National League. And he actually sort of sees himself going towards that younger demographic in terms of players. And I know when watching Wealdstone, I know you've seen Wealdstone play. They operate on very much a similar thing. Maidenhead. It's one of those things that teams need to do at National League level to sort of almost consolidate before they can then start to build on those better players. So, I mean, were you very conscious last year being in the National League South, watching the opposition and almost picking out players from teams and thinking he could do me a job next year if we get promoted?
Yeah, definitely. Jordan Thomas was. I mean, we have our recruitment is based heavily on data and statistics and also the eye. So he scored really heavily on our metrics, and obviously we followed his progress. And when he became available, he was one of the first ones that we went for. So of course you're always looking, and like I go back to what I said, when every team we played last year, it was like a cup final. You know, when you play against Yeovil in the 6,000 at Hewish Park, it's like, you can see the opposition. They come out, they're taking pictures, and their levels raised by 20%. And there were so many players that we saw last year that their levels, when they played against us, we would watch them against us, and they would be here, and then we watch them the next week, and their levels would be back down. So you have to be careful, with that as well.
How do you plan to because I'm sure that's something that you might be looking at, where you've mentioned there about you kind of being the big fish in quite a small pond last season, where I think I still see Yeovil as probably one of the bigger sides in the division historically. They've been in the Football League. They're proven at the moment, the crowds that they're pulling. I know we saw last season, you mentioned there, crowds of almost 6,000 at Hewish Park. How do you plan? Are you planning to kind of adjust your style in a way to the division? I know you've mentioned about having quite a distinctive style of play, but are you looking to adjust that perhaps at all?
No, we won't change that, because I think that's what made us successful, is that we have a way of playing, and the boys that we have, they're used to that. If I say to them, listen boys, we're going to rip that up and we're going to start booting the ball as far as we can and getting everybody behind the ball, and we lose it, I think you can get in a pickle. You look at Wealdstone, so we'll talk about Wealdstone with Paul. They're so pure in the way that, when I watched them over the last, when my son Charlie played for him, they used to take so many risks with the ball. But what made them so bad made them so good, because I watched them play at Notts County on a Tuesday night. They got beat, but Notts County didn't have a clue how to play against them, because they were so free in possession with the ball and no pressure on them, that they were just incredibly tough to play against. And and I think that's a powerful thing. I think if you have a real distinct way of playing, it can be really difficult for the opposition, because if they get one press wrong, you can cut them to bits. And you look at Crawley last year. So Scott Lindsay, my assistant at Forest Green, they were ridiculously pure in the way they played. Would they have had the biggest budget? No, they would have had one of the lowest budgets. But Scott stuck to his beliefs, and they ended up in the last 10 games murdering everybody and absolutely murdering the playoffs, and they got promoted into League One. So I think it's important that you stick to your beliefs and what you do.
I mean, it'd be interesting this year, Mark, because obviously, as I say, I watched you a couple of times last year, and because you were that team to beat, I mean, there was one particular game I watched at Slough, and they adopted that that attitude of dropping deep and making you play through them and making it difficult for you to beat. I think you're probably, the challenge you have this year is you might get the opportunity to be a bit more free and a bit more expressive, because teams aren't going to be, no disrespect, they're not going to be as fearful of you as maybe the National League South teams are. So I suppose it's working out when you stick or when you twist against these better sides, because they could exploit the fact that you're quite expressive going forward. Whereas last year, in the National League South, the low block and the 4-4-2 and getting those 8 men behind the ball, it's a different way of playing. So I guess from your perspective, it's getting the lads into the mindset of you might get more opportunity to play the way you want.
Yeah, you're right. I don't think anyone's going to be fearing Yeovil next year, because we play our first game's Hartlepool, so big club, football league only 2 or 3 years ago. So they're going to be thinking, hang on a minute, why are we going to sit in against Yeovil? We're going to go and get after them. And we want that. We want to take teams up. We want it to be like, right, you come at us, we'll come at you, and rather than, I tell you what, we'll get. We had some games last year where some opposition would put 11 men behind the ball on the edge of their box and would not move. And if we scored once, game over. And they were happy with 1-0. And that's their prerogative. There's nothing wrong with that, because, the discrepancy in budget between us and Dartford or whatever was massive. So, but this year, I'm hoping that shackles are off and nobody's going to fear Yeovil, and nor should they. But we're confident that we can have lots of the ball. However, we played Wrexham away in the FA Cup, and we were brilliant in possession of the ball. We had loads and loads of the ball at Wrexham. But the difference was they had better forward players than us and beat us 3-0.
Yeah.
So, it's the way it is.
Just coming into this season then, and, we looked at your time at Forest Green. What you did there was from the National League South, you got them into the Football League. Is that the long-term ambition for you at Yeovil?
Of course, yeah, ideally, yeah. I mean, Forest Green's a little bit different. The owner there is very, very, very wealthy, and he made no secret of the fact that he wanted to get in the Football League, and I was lucky enough to do that in the first season I was there, in what was then a competitive league with Lincoln City, Tranmere Rovers, Forest. It was a real competitive league, and we managed to win the playoff final. So, that has to be the aim. I think if you look at Yeovil, I don't know, 11, 12 years ago, they were in the Championship.
Yeah.
It's mad, isn't it? When you think of it like that. But we have no divine right, because we have that history. We have no divine right to think that we're going to get anywhere near the top of the league. It's going to come down to the way we play, our recruitment, our momentum, and we'll need 2 or 3 of our players in key areas to really step up and score some goals.
Who do you see as your key, as the sort of key men in your side then, Mark, going into the season?
Well, I think we made a really good acquisition in Aaron Jarvis, from Torquay. I think he's 26. I think he's a proper number 9. I think there's still development in him. He's a real handful, and I think he will get us up the pitch. We've still got Big Frank Nublet, who is a real handful at the level. I believe he's still a Football League player. We've got Jordan Young, who was electric last year. We've got signed Brett McGavin. We've got Matt Worthington. We've got some really technically good players. So I think in some games we will have a lot of the ball. We'll need to defend really well, and we'll need to take some chances.
Yeah, I suppose the defending is the thing that you'll probably be tested against most, because you probably weren't as tested as much last season as you would have liked in terms of the pressure put on your own goal and your own box. So I suppose that'll be the acid test, because you clearly know you've got the quality going forward and the ability with, especially with Charlie on set plays and sort of breaking the game out, along with Sonny Low, Blue Everton, who's very good technically on the ball, having seen him play for the Stones. So I suppose it will be how do you do defensively, because last year were you really tested as much as you would like? So I would suggest you probably weren't. So if your defense can stand up to it and you can play the way you like, then you're gonna pick up more points than you're not, if that makes sense.
Yeah, agree. I think that last year we conceded really low amount of goals. I think we were the lowest of one of them in the league. You can't have one without the other. So I think the way you attack dictates how you defend, if you know what I mean. So I think if you're a team that are heavily reliant on playing without the ball, basically you get the ball for, you have to defend, you have to have lots of defending to do. Whereas if you're a team that have lots of the ball, you probably have to defend higher up the pitch, because so we will be one of them teams, I think, that so we can target our defending because we kind of know where we're going to lose the ball. We're going to lose the ball by trying to thread balls through, or with our flair players, rather than we're not going to be sat on the edge of our box camped in, because we want to play football. You can't have one without the other. You can't say, right, how are we going to, depending on how you attack is how you're going to defend, and the other way around, depending on how you defend. So you can't have one without, it's all one. So we want to have lots of the ball, which means that we haven't got as much defending to do as if we made the game a lottery by keep giving the ball back to the opposition.
How do you say the overall atmosphere is then at the moment surrounding Yeovil Town, getting promoted back into the National League? The crowds that you get in are crowds that I don't think Yeovil have seen for quite a long time. So what would you say that overall atmosphere is like at Yeovil at the moment?
Well, I think when you're winning games of football, atmosphere is always fantastic, isn't it? So you win, we won lots of games last year. We were getting 5,000-6,000 every week at home. But if you lose 2 or 3 games on the trot, the atmosphere changes like that, doesn't it? So it's a real tightrope, and managers will tell you if you have to try and start well, get that momentum going, because if you lose the first 2 or 3 games, you're scrambling. You know what football fans are like? Oh, this is rubbish, and players sense that the atmosphere is so hard to turn a negative ship around. And then the same token, last year, if you get the momentum going forward, it's hard to stop going the other way. So we want to keep that momentum going.
Yeah, I mean, it's you clearly had your sort of sticky patch early on with the supporters and the atmosphere down at Hewish Park, but since Martin Hellier's come in, Mark, has it settled down behind the scenes, and have you been able to get on and do what you wanted to do and recruit? Because it clearly feels that way, and I suppose you're going to be even better placed being able to go into the National League with a pre-season under your belt, rather than being half sort of parachuted in halfway through where you were sort of the last time you were with the National League with Yeovil.
Yeah, when I first went in, I think we were lost 1 in 11. The first 11 games, and obviously the stewardship changed, and Matt Ugler came in, and it was chaos. And obviously then when you lose that many games and there's that much propaganda behind the scenes and people trying to turn fans against you, it becomes difficult. But when Martin Hellier came in, he just said to me, listen, you know what you're doing. I'm going to let you get on with that. I'm going to try and make the club good again off the pitch. I'm going to make the match day experience really good. I'm going to do this, and this. And he did all of it. And he left me to get on with the football. And he left me to do the recruitment. Did I get every player right? No. Did I get some things wrong? Yeah. But that's recruitment. It's impossible to get everyone right. But the key thing was the owner recognised that wasn't his forte. And he let me get on with that bit, and I think that was really clever from him. And he's still the same now. He's like really engaged in it, and he wants us to do really well.
But a few people that have come in then and wanted to put their questions across to you, Mark. Someone's coming in and said, What do you think the main reasons were for Yeovil's success within the National League South last season?
I think we had really good players for the level. I think we had an amazing following, home and away, which made it really difficult for the opposition. Home and away, we were taking it 500 in every away game to London, wherever we were. And we had a real way of playing that made it really difficult for the opposition.
We've also had come in then. We've also had, hi Matt, a couple of questions from me. How much do you enjoy improving young players and giving them the chance in the first team?
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the biggest I think that's the best part of the job. Like when you try and push young players through and I think back and some players that are given a chance too, Ethan Pinnock, Dan Byrne, players like that have gone on to have really good careers. I get so much enjoyment out watching them play in the Premier League, and there's nothing better than you take a gamble on a young player and you put him in the team, and it's going to be sink or swim, and he swims and does really well. You get so much enjoyment out of that.
Yes, certainly. I know there's other players as well, the likes of Reece Brown as well under yourself. Of course, he went up to Huddersfield as well, and he did well for Forest Green and managed to get that big move. But we've also had come in. He's also said, "How do you manage to keep fit when they finish playing? Then how do you manage to do that in pre-season?"
I think football's changed now. I think when I played, and say 20 years ago, I think all the players stopped. As soon as the last game finished, everyone would go on holiday, put 2 stone on, drink as much as they could, and then the first day back of pre-season, everybody would come back really overweight, and you'd have to spend a month trying to get them fit, or trying to get us all fit. I think now players are so much more professional that they come back ready to train in terms of football, and you don't have to waste all that time running up and down hills and on beaches and cross countries. You can really get into the football really early on.
We've also had someone's come in and said, what positions are you still looking to strengthen in?
I think we need a cover at left back. We've probably got one of the best left backs in the league in Alex Whittle. But we need some cover in case anything happens to him. And I still think we need another attacking player that can get us 15 to 20 goals. But they are absolute gold dust. And they're going to cost about $2,500 a week. So if anyone knows of one, please let me know.
I know there were the likes of Jake Hyde, Reece Murphy, who you've previously had. And of course, they had that experience in the National League. Was that just something for you where perhaps it just didn't work out, keeping them on longer? No,
they were outstanding. Reece Murphy was outstanding for us. When I signed Reece Murphy and Jake Hyde, we kind of knew historically that they weren't going to be fit for every game. I think we knew that if we could get a percentage of games out of them, that they were going to get an amount of goals between them, which would take us close to having the chance to win in the league. And that's how it transpired. Location, obviously, Reece lives in the south, Brighton way, and family as well. And when the Dorking one came up, it was far too good for him to turn down. And I think he'll go and score 20 odd goals next year for Dorking.
Yeah, I mean, Mark said last night when we spoke to him about adopted a similar attitude towards Reece Murphy as you has, Mark, because he's got Alfie Rutherford, and he said, if I can get 20 games out of Alfie Rutherford and 20 games out of Reece Murphy, and it's almost like two players in one over a season, they will get the goals that will help get them promoted. So I suppose that's what you got to take when you've got a slightly more experienced forward line. I mean, you had obviously Frank Noble as well, and who's a big lad that got injured, Alex
Fisher.
So you had like the four of them, and to have that luxury at National League South level is really great because you've got that ability then to churn them and change them, and I think that's obviously what Mark was doing. And I guess that's what I suppose some National League sides like Yeovil, like Wealdstone, like Halifax have to do is almost, if you're not going to get your 20 goal a season striker, can you get 2 10-goal season strikers and see where that takes you?
That's why I go back to what I said earlier. We need 2 or 3 of our boys on the periphery to step up and get 7, 10 goals this year. I mean, Jordan Young, who we signed from Chippenham, he could play. You know, like if everything's right and he steps up, he's a championship ability player. So, you know, and if he grasps that opportunity, he can go and rip things. He can go and rip defenses to pieces like he did last year. But like I said, we need every. I think it's difficult if you haven't got Wrexham, Notts County, that kind of money. You can't go and get a Macaulay Langstaff on the amount of wages and transfer fee. You just can't afford it. So you have to try and find a different way. And if that's having 4 or 5 lads that are going to get you 10 goals, then so be it.
Yeah, and I remember speaking to Stu and Matty from Wealdstone before they went to Notts County, and that was very much their thinking as well. Is that, you know, the goals we'll have to get the goals from somewhere. You know, they're not going to maybe come from that centre forward, but if you've got a centre midfield player that can get 3 or 4, and a centre half can get 3 or 4, and you know your full backs or your wing backs, then actually sharing the goal. It doesn't really matter where the goals come from ultimately, does it? You just need to score goals to be able to win matches. So, yeah, I suppose from anyone's perspective, Yeovil and Wealdstone, Halifax, any of those teams in and around the National League consolidation areas, you almost want those players. They got to show a real level of consistency every week, haven't they, Martin? I know I've spoken to you about this before. Is why aren't these guys playing EFL? And it's the consistency on a weekly basis. You know, and I suppose that's what you want to see more of in the National League now from your team is that consistency going forward.
And the reason they're not is exactly that. So that are they as fit as the EFL players? Yes. Have they got as much ability? Yes. Do they make the right decision as many times as the EFL players? No. So basically, they're not as consistent. So, and that's where they have to get to. So some of these boys will get to 25, 26, 27, and the penny finally drops with them, and they end up being EFL players. So it is about that consistency, and hopefully, like you name them clubs there, like Halifax, us, Wealdstone, who else is in that bracket? There's Eastleigh, these kind of clubs.
Eastleigh, Dagenham, you know.
But somebody, 2 of those have to get in the playoffs. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
You know, there's, you know, you look at your Barnet, you look at your Forest Greens and South Ends and Suttons. You expect them to be battling out at the top, but 1, 2 of us around that, somebody has to get in the playoffs. Or
yeah, I mean, we've seen it with Altrincham over the last couple of years. Halifax, you know, again last year, Solihull, you know, from absolutely nowhere. I predicted them to go down last season because of the change of management, football director, you know, their squad, Aldershot, you know, I think they just sort of ran out of steam. But you're right, there's room there for 1 or 2 teams to sort of knock on the door if the consistency can be found.
It's like once you get that lottery ticket and you get in the playoffs, Solihull. So Solihull played, what did they play? They played Halifax, they played Barnet, and they could have easily won the final. You know, once you get that lottery ticket, who's to say you can't get the golden ticket and get in the EFL? Because, you know, it happens. When I was at Forest Green, Lincoln won it. We finished in the playoffs and we beat Tranmere in the final. So it's like somebody has to win the playoffs, don't they? Yeah. You know, why can't it be one of them teams like Bromley? Would Bromley have one of the top 5 or 6 budgets in the league? Probably not. I don't know. Last year probably wouldn't have. But Woody's done an amazing job and they've managed to get in the EFL.
I think particularly at the moment, I know you've mentioned there, haven't you, about there's still that depth in the division and maybe it's getting stronger further and further down the division now, which is something that I totally agree with. I don't think we've still got the same number of huge, sleeping giants in the league. Of course, there's still some. I'd say Yeovil are one. You've got York, Oldham, Southend, a few more that you could probably add, but there isn't that same number of clubs like that. But I think your sides like your Altrinchams, your Gatesheads are getting richer and probably getting stronger as well. It's been proven that they clearly are getting more investment. So there's clearly more depth to quality, I think, in the division, the further you go down. But what I would say is what's happening now is there's clearly more opportunities. It's like this season, and I know me and Paul are thinking of doing like predictions, and we're there and we're thinking who we're going to win the league, and there's no standout favourites, where last year, of course, they were Chesterfield, and it felt like there was always that opportunity for another side to get promoted through the playoffs, and that was where it was harder to predict. This year, there's no outright favourite, I don't think, and it's same with a side that could potentially go up with them. So there's clearly a door open, or maybe even two doors open for certain clubs out there to get promoted.
Well, you mentioned York there. I mean, York are spending really big money in terms of, look at the players they're signing on the wages. So you would expect, I'm sure York are expecting to finish in the top 3 or 4. Mm-hmm. Have to be with what they're spending. So the list goes that, I think you could list 12, 14 teams that would all have a shout at saying, well, we could make the playoffs. Everybody says to me every year, oh, Maiden, they're going to get relegated this year.
Yeah, we always fall for that.
And Alan Devonshire is an absolute magician because they never even really even look like it. Whenever I watch them play at home, they look as though they've like the most experienced. They know what they're doing. They know how to get results, and you just can't ever see them being in trouble with Dev and the way they do it. So there's no easy games in that league. You think, oh, you've got you've got Tamworth away, part-time, 3G, slope on the pitch. I used to be manager there. It's a horrible place to go and try and get a result. There is no easy games. Wheelstone, hard place to go.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's true. And it's, be interesting because it is a much more even field. But I think what's interesting from the teams coming down, there's no basket cases amongst them, is there?
No.
They might not have done it quite right on the field of play and got themselves relegated. But Forest Green are a steady ship. Sutton, clearly a steady ship. We haven't got the Scunthorpes and the Yeovils and the Southends coming down. And I think also what doesn't help is, Rochdale have got new investment. Southend have obviously sorted themselves out. Some point, Oldham will sort themselves out under their new owner.
Massive club. So you're talking about the Oldham founder members of the Premier League. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? They get 9,000 at home if they've won 2 games. They get Forest Green have got Steve Cottrell as the manager in the National League.
Yeah.
Steve Cottrell. Do you know what I mean? Like, if they'd have had Steve Cottrell 2 years ago, they'd still be in League One. Do you know what I mean? So there's so many teams in there. I think it's a tough league, and I think the depth goes further down than it did last year.
It's got to be the hardest league to get out of, surely, Mark. I know they talk about a championship and the 10 whatever it is $1 billion game, but to get out of the National League, it's got to be one of the hardest things to do.
So, I mean, I was lucky. I went to Forest Green. I left Notts County and I went to Forest Green. I managed, and you get promoted in your first year, and I was like, whew, so relieved to get out at the first attempt because it's a graveyard. There's so many teams that, like Forest Green, were the longest serving members of the National League when I went there. Longest serving members, and to get out of it is such a relief. And once you get out of it, you got to make sure you don't come back without being disrespectful, because once you get back in, it's going to be even harder to get back out. So it's, I'm sure Forest Green are like, oh, here we go again, and it's so tough to get out of.
Would you say that's probably your biggest achievement as a manager so far, getting Forest Green out of the National League? Because I think we can probably all agree here, as people who are, I think, well educated on the National League, supporting National League clubs and managing National League clubs, that it is such a difficult league to get out of.
No, I think my biggest achievement was getting having Barrow 6 points clear of relegation when I left, with virtually zero facilities, basically a part-time club in the Lake District.
Yeah.
That was probably my biggest achievement in football. I've worked for some difficult chairman as well. So, but that's part of it, isn't it? It's what makes it enjoyable. Forest Green I was 5 years manager at Forest Green, and that's rare nowadays to be at one club for 5 years.
Mhm.
I'm really proud of that level, that achievement to be at one club for 5 years and to establish them in the Football League was I think it's a good achievement.
And I suppose it was. How will you be received when you go back, Mark? Do you think?
Forest Green?
Yeah.
Well, I think whenever you go back to a club, there'll always be some that want to abuse you, won't there? And there's always some that are thankful for what you've done. That's just the way management is. It's like we had a brilliant season last year and we got promoted. We played 2 friendlies at home against 2 League One teams, really narrow, really tight games. And myself and some of the players still get stick. But I think that's just the way society and football is now, and it's so hard not to react to it or not to respond to it. But I suppose it's part of it. So will I be received well at Forest Green? By some, yeah. By some, no. But football.
And I mean, no, I was going to say, well, is there any particular games that you're looking or grounds you're looking forward to going to, Mark? I know. Obviously, you played in the EFL, and your dad was a professional footballer, so you've been around it an awful long time. So, is there any? Do you still get that enjoyment of going to these big grounds and away days, especially with the teams that you've managed?
Yeah, I do. I tell you what, though, Paul, I loved last year in the south. I loved going to Tunbridge. I loved going to Hampton. I loved going to Slack. I just loved the authenticity of these football clubs that they survive game to game, and Yeovil turning up with 500 fans means so much to them because of the revenue, and I enjoyed so much going to these grounds. It was a real sort of really refreshed me, sort of my sort of love for the game, and I really enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to going. Yeah, I'm looking forward to going to York to see Mr. Ugler in the nicest possible way. Southend, but all these big atmospheres, Forest Green, Rochdale, Hartley. But I'm looking forward to all of it. It's just every game is a challenge and a different atmosphere. I can't wait.
Is there any another question that did come in for us was do you listen to like any pre-match music before the game? Is there any like a song that you like listen to or the lads listen to at all?
So we had a playlist last year.
Yeah.
I think Big Frank is the go, like in charge of it.
Yeah.
And our song last year was "Life Is Life" by wait there. "Life Is Life" by it's a foreign band.
Yeah, that's
and we played that before the boys went out every game.
Opus,
that's the one, mate.
I just googled it. I've never Live Is Life.
Yeah. And so Frank had that blasting whenever the players went out for the game. That's where we were. So that one stuck with us.
Fair enough then. And another one that we had that came in was like, if let's say the team wins, what do you have to celebrate food wise? Is that something that you guys do? I know other clubs do, but is that something that you guys do?
What, as a team or individually?
Well, just as a team, food wise, or if not yourself. Or
so after a game, the boys have pizza.
Yeah.
So we've got a brilliant chef. So loads of pizza come down, refueling. I will say, like if you win a game of football, the relief on a Saturday afternoon is so big. Though all your town and your fans' hopes rests on your shoulders, and you feel that pressure the whole week. And at 5 o'clock, you walk back down the tunnel with 3 points. I sit in my office with my head in my hands for 5 minutes thinking, thank God for that. I can relax for another 36 hours till, or whatever it is, till Tuesday night when we've got another game. So I'll have a Thatcher's or a glass of wine and enjoy that moment, because it is so precious, because you never know that when the next one's coming. Trust me.
Fair enough then. Paul, have you got any questions to add? Or
No, not from me, Mark. I appreciate your time.
No
yeah,
problem.
Mark, it's been great to have you on. And yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure to have yourself on, and best of luck for Yeovil this season.
Thank you very much, guys. Appreciate
Thank you.
it.
Cheers.